It's one thing to have a high sense of purpose when you are addressing humanitarian relief, quite another view from the ground level, and Fleet Forum tends to bridge these two worlds. And with us today on Insead Knowledge is one of the men who has been a founder of Fleet Forum. He's Rob McConnell, and he's a consultant in vehicle fleet management, and you're also the executive in residence at Insead Social Innovation Center. That's a mouthful, but we're very happy to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And sitting next to you is Luke van Wassenhove, who is in charge of the Social Innovation Center, and whose role in Fleet Forum is pretty profound as well. So let me start with our guest first, and I'll ask Rob the basic question. What's Fleet Forum?
Fleet Forum is an association of interested parties in humanitarian vehicle fleet management. The core being agencies that operate vehicle fleets for humanitarian purposes. So we have the UN agencies, the Red Cross and NGOs. But that's part of the team. The rest, the other interested parties include commercial sector, academia, like Insead, various people who have an interest in developing knowledge in this sector.
And Luke, why do you have an interest in developing knowledge in this sector? What can you then bring back to the table?
Well, in the humanitarian world, think about it for a second, there's nothing you can do if you don't have fleet.
That's true.
So it's sort of the lynching pin, or the thing that makes things work between the higher level of the organization and the nitty-gritty operational issues. And that interaction needs to work properly.
So what kinds of services does a consultant in this actually do? I mean, it seems kind of obvious that some of the issues involved in fleet management in relief efforts, I mean, sometimes you're dealing, as Luke says, without roads, but what are some of the other issues you look at?
As Luke has pointed out, fleet is a critical enabler for program delivery. Yet, as in many support services, the value is not necessarily recognized within the organization. So you can have not only massive cost investment in the capital, but also operating of the fleet, but they're not integrated the fleets are not integrated into the logistics planning of operations.
Can you give me an example, perhaps, of how a fleet might be used to provide or improve the effectiveness of an organization?
I'm currently working with the World Health Organization in India on a big project where they have 350 vehicles. These are for transporting personnel. This is how a group of surveillance medical officers, doctors, travel around the country and identifying cases of polio, and then also supervising how the immunization campaigns are run. Now, that fleet is a very good example. It's basically been run as 350 individual vehicles by 350 individual users. We're trying to integrate that into a single fleet with single asset control, cost control, and actually use of the vehicle control. So it makes the whole operation much more effective and efficient.
That's not just saying to somebody, everybody has to drive this way or that way or whatever. I mean, there has to be some organization at the ground level. And I know you've done some research into this. How hard is that?
Affecting change is very difficult, right? And in this particular world, you're dealing with governments, you're dealing with national organizations that may be related to their governments, you're dealing with NGOs, and they all have to work together. On the one hand, you can look at fleet management as, all right, how many vehicles do I need? How do I use them optimally? And how do I provide maintenance? And that's done almost like a science, but in a difficult environment. And then you have the whole organizational issues around it and the misalignment of incentives. You can start very simply by making the people understand the consequences of their decisions. Now, one of the issues in vehicles is a lot of these vehicles are very, very poorly treated by the drivers, and poorly maintained, and et cetera, and there's lots of accidents that happen, which you wouldn't like as a humanitarian organization. But then when you look into, people say, yeah, we have to train the drivers better. Yes, we have to train the drivers better. But then if the expat says to the driver, it doesn't matter, you've already driven for 14 hours, you need to drive a little bit more and drive a little bit faster, and that's no problem when you drive after dark. And you see what's happening, right? So it's not just a matter of training the drivers, it's also making the others accountable or understand that they have a big impact.
Is this soluble?
Yes, it is solvable, but I think that the vehicles, very often, vehicles operating in these environments are the most visible manifestation of the organization's presence. If you turn on the TV and there's any news coverage of a disaster or an event or any activity of humanitarian organizations, it almost always includes a vehicle running past in the shot, and that vehicle is almost always carrying an emblem, whether it be a Red Cross, a blue UN symbol, or one of the NGOs. These vehicles are extremely recognizable.
A lot of the constraints are imposed by funders who would earmark donations for a particular development project, might give money for the trucks, but then not for the maintenance. And
You have to expand their thinking on that.
and yes, I mean, they may not understand the consequences of the constraints that they're imposing.
How has the scope of your activities at the Fleet Forum ground level changed over the last couple of years? One could argue that having enough fleets to argue about is an improvement, or am I wrong?
I think what the work that we've been doing here at Insead and what the work the Fleet Forum has been doing and so on, the change that's really impacted in the last few years is people are beginning to become much more aware of the importance of fleet and the fact that relatively small inputs can actually deliver quite significant improvements in efficiency or road safety or the environmental impact or a combination of all of those things. And that is a great opportunity. When you're starting very low in the curve, small inputs deliver big results. And I think people are just beginning to see that.
Who are the members of Fleet Forum, and how do you grow the organization if you want to?
It's not only the UN agencies or the humanitarian organizations, it's private sector, it's the donors. Donors play a very important role in this. It's academia to bring all these parties together to really create knowledge is what we're trying to do, I think, there, and then dissipate that knowledge into this broad group. To give you an idea of the scale of what we're talking about, the agencies that participate in these Fleet Forum events collectively have a fleet of something in the region of 100,000 vehicles across the world. It's a large group of vehicles. Now, we've estimated that the cost of operating that fleet on an annual basis, including depreciation or replacement costs, is not far off £1 billion a year. So this is £1 billion of mostly government money, because it's coming through, the large proportion comes through institutional donors. But the problem of that, it's not one pot. This is fragmented down to not even an organization by organization basis. It's fragmented right down to individual project basis. And because it's so fragmented, it's difficult to get to bring it together to try and generate the economies of scale that we could perhaps find. Logically, we should be able to find.
But let me ask what you guys get out of each other. I mean, what does Insead bring to the table? Why are you working together?
Humanitarian programs are run by people with a high moral purpose, but they depend on the logisticians, this lower class of support staff, and by working with Insead and applying our fleet management, or subjecting our fleet management operations to the academic scrutiny and the rigor that we get from Insead, really gives us a very powerful case that we can take back to our senior management, saying this is not just us guys down in the workshop telling you this is what needs to be done. We have gone to a leading academic institution, a business school, to help us look at our process, look at the way that we're working, and to study it and come to conclusions that we can then take back to our organization.
And the challenges are enormous. I mean, this fleet management, like so many other problems, are extremely dynamic. The humanitarian world is changing so much. Climate change, complex problems will lead to big migrations, maybe more potential conflicts. access to water, more and more refugee camps.
It's a growing
More
business.
than half of the population now in cities. I mean, vehicles that drive around in the countryside to optimize that and manage that is a very different thing from having vehicles in a 30 million city.
I think a benchmarking exercise could be extremely valuable. Looking at how different organizations operate their fleets, identifying best practice, comparing it organization to organization, thereby assisting organizations to identify where their weaknesses lay, and then give them strategies to actually address those.
It's just what like it happened in the business world. Either you can show that you're the best in a particular function in your company, or you'll be outsourced. And so the same is going to happen in the humanitarian world. Why should the humanitarians run their fleet? Why should they do their accounting? Why should they do their information services? Why should they do their human resources? All of that in the business world has been outsourced, right? If it's not the core competence. Well, it could be outsourced in the business world. Even worse, private companies could go in and do the job if they can do it better.
Insead is known within the community, has been for some time. Luke and the team have been working with the humanitarian sector for almost 10 years. Insead extremely well positioned to provide or to guide this benchmarking, this fleet excellence from a position of neutrality.
Thank you. You did that very well. we talked about that before.
I think I'll thank both of you for doing a very nice job with us on Insead Knowledge. Thank you very much.
Very good. It's a pleasure. Thank you.